Zimbabwe's public debt has ballooned to over 21 billion United States dollars, about 1,400 United States dollars per citizen. The government borrows, but it's the people who pay. As the nation heads to the 7th Debt Conference in Mutare, running under the theme Sustainable Public Debt Management Towards Vision 2030, we spoke to members of parliament. They shared insights on how this debt was accumulated, what it means for ordinary Zimbabweans, and what Parliament must do to ensure transparency and accountability.
There are two reasons why we find, or rather three reasons why we find ourselves in this debt predicament. The first reason is that the government borrowed money ostensibly to do certain activities meant for economic development, and the government failed to pay, and the interest has been accumulating. So you find that in terms of arrears, we actually were above. The second problem that we also then did, we have been financing our budget on a deficit. We've been having budget deficits for a long time. Every year is always budget deficits, except at the time when we had the inclusive government, when it was Minister of Finance, where we had a balanced budget. The third reason is also to do with the assumption of debt by the government, the central bank debt, and also a number of domestic debt that is there, which the government is likely to assume. And I can tell you that the current debt of 21 billion may actually be a very, very modest figure, because there's a possibility that the government is likely to take over debt which on those entities that were taken or transferred to Mutapa Investment, entities like Zimbabwe, National Resources Zimbabwe, and others, whose balance sheet proves that they are technically insolvent. And for those institutions or parastatals to remain viable and for Mutapa to turn them around, it means the debt burden needs to be transferred back to the government. So this is part of the reason why we find ourselves in a big debt situation.
We have a huge problem as it relates to the debt question in Zimbabwe. And this is something that we need to be concerned about as citizens and find a lasting solution. So if you look at the amount that we appropriated in the last budget for debt servicing, you will see that it was about, I think, 5% to 8%, which is a significant amount of money that could have been used for social services, your health, your education, social security, and all the other issues that citizens care about. But we allocated these resources for debt servicing because we need to service our debt. And if you look at the budget for health, for instance, we failed to meet the Abuja Declaration. And that money could have been used to put to health, to the health budget. If you look at the budget of the Ministry of Women Affairs, if you look at the budget of the Ministry of Youth, all of those budgets are below the money that we actually appropriated for debt servicing. So this is a huge problem in terms of, crowding out social services. And this, disproportionately affects the poor, who are in the majority of cases, young people and women. Because these are the people that use, public services. We know that the rich always go for private, alternatives, whereas the poor then, access these public resources. So if they're not adequately funded, that means we've got a problem. If you look at our health situation, education situation in the country is not looking good, and these resources could have been used for those public service. If you also look at, because if women do not access health facilities, it's going to, result in increased unpaid care work, because women, bear the brunt. I mean, they're the ones who look after the sick, after the children. So if those, budget lines in education, in health are not adequately funded because the resources are being channeled towards debt servicing, it will mean that, women are going to suffer more.
When we talk about public debt, we talk about something that concerns especially the young people. And this is because 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's the young people of today that will have the burden of having to pay off whatever debt is there. Some of these debts include legacy debts. The one thing I'm proud of our government for is that it is committed to ensuring that the debt process is something that is managed. We have seen the African Development Bank CEO and chairman come to Zim on numerous occasions as they're trying to work out the debt that Zimbabwe has to work around. We know, of course, there's the constitutional provision of debt to the improvements on farm development. I think the 3.5 billion for the former white farmers. Dealing with this helps us be able to move on in the agricultural space. It also helps us in terms of improvement with our relations with our Western countries. The aspect of knowing that right now we don't owe IMF any loans, and we managed to clear that, but we're working on other loans that we still have to make sure that are cleared. For us as the young people, it's important that whatever debt is taken from now on is debt that is managed properly, that goes towards things that we can see. For example, recently we saw the Trabablis interchange. Those are things that are worth taking debt for. Or even the agricultural, recently ADA has been able to do a lot of development in agriculture, which has contributed to the bumper yields that we talk about. Debt that contributes to GDP is debt worth taking, but we have to manage how we spend it. And so far, I think we're on track, and we look forward to more management of our debt situation.
They are not critics per se to say we are borrowing without tangible things. It is a fact that we have been borrowing since time immemorial, but there's nothing that we can say we can find on the ground to say we have benefited from borrowing. Under normal circumstances, if you look at the Public Debt Management Act, it says when you borrow, you must put that money to high impact economic projects so that we get a return. The return on the investment which we get using borrowed money must be bigger than the return than the interest rates for the loan. At the end of the day, we will say that borrowing is sustainable and it is productive to this country. So there was nothing. All the loans which have been conducted so far, there's nothing to show for it. So they are very correct that there's nothing to show for it.
Let me just give you a synopsis of the debt that this country has. In 2018, when Tulik became the Minister of Finance, our debt as a country stood at around, I think it was about, our external debt was around 8 billion, somewhere there, circa. Now, the external debt is around 13 billion, owed to the Bretton institutions and other financial institutions across the world. Now, the problem is that most of these are debt arrears that this country is paying. So you find that with the World Bank and so forth, we owe so much that we had so many arrears, and now the country is reeling, not because the debt is being really added onto from the economy, but because we are paying arrears that we owe to various financial institutions. Now, as Parliament, obviously, our role has always been oversight, and if you check from the time of 2018, all the loans that this country is taking, they come through Parliament. But before 2018, that wasn't happening. So the country was having so much debt. So in terms of our checks and balances, we as Parliament are doing our job. But because the country has been failing to raise enough money to pay its debt, so the debt has been exponentially rising. But what I can say to you is that now we are focused as a country to pay back the debt that we owe, because so that we can borrow more. A country has to borrow to survive. You know that's given. The more you borrow, the more things that you get to do as a country. So we are working now very hard to make sure that that debt that we owe is being paid, and is paid timeously. And the arrears are also paid, so that this country can get a good credit rating that will be good for the economy.